Uh, Zia has had, he's a senior VP for strategic ecosystem and industry solutions at VMware. And prior to that, Zia has an stellar experience being having a ringside view of the entire ecosystem industry. So, as a CEO of Streetline, a partner at BCG, managing ecosystems at SAP previous to this, leading the corporate strategy and design thinking team. I want to get to design thinking and architecting the modern ecosystem a little bit later. Zia, so heads up. First, amazing career across the board, having a ringside view. Maybe just one question around just the evolution of partnering as you've seen it. What are your thoughts on this? When did you begin in partnering versus where you're at, and you've had this view? What do you think about this transformation of this profession itself?
No, it's a good question. Yeah, you're kind of highlighting my potential age here, Amit, which is not great. But as you know, and I've known you and Chip for a long time. When I kind of started this journey at SAP, I think it's almost like 18, 20 years ago when I led the ecosystem work there. And I think there's probably two or three. I mean, a lot has changed right now. I mean, the obvious things are the technology's changed. The sophistication of how you need to manage the ecosystem has changed. The data availability and what you can do with that has changed. We've kind of gone from managing everything literally on paper to kind of Excel sheets. So now you've got fully integrated systems, including the kind that amazing stuff that WorkSpan is doing. I think there are probably a couple of things that have not changed, right? And Bron has mentioned some of these. First of all, is you're not partnering just for the hell of it, right? And it's still amazing, Amit, how many companies issue press releases, do other announcements. They get maybe half a day or a week of a pop of like, this is fantastic, these two companies are coming together, and then nothing happens, and then that just fades into the background. And there's still way too much of that happening, right? And as we kind of get deeper into this conversation, so I think what hasn't changed is you have to create value. I mean, first of all, you have to create value for your joint customers. Mm-hmm. And that has not changed, should never change. That's why you're partnering, right? Mm-hmm. The other thing that hasn't changed, should not change, is it really is about people. I mean, we spend a lot of time talking about technology. We spend a lot of time talking about the products and how these things will come together. I'm a strong believer at the end of the day, whether it's a customer relationship or partner relationships, it's about like-minded people coming together, creating magic, taking a personal risk internally in their company. I mean, all of that stuff is what leads to amazing partnerships. Because if you're doing it right, you are extending beyond your skis. You're taking more of a risk. You're doing something that hasn't been done before. And if all that is true, then that's also true from a personal perspective, right? So these are I think some of the principles that were true back then that are true now. The sophistication, the tools that you have available, the data, the systems, the tech stack has become so complex, and it's kind of microservices and little pieces of the puzzle, which is why I think it's an amazing time to be somebody that's involved in partnership-related topics, ecosystem-related topics. It is as valuable a skill and a role as a salesperson or a product engineer. That wasn't the case 15 years ago, right? And no offense to anybody, at some point, this used to be, you failed at sales, you don't know what to do, hey, go be a partner person. Right? I think that has completely changed. It's a skill, it's a valuable skill, you're good at it, it's business development. So that's why I've loved engaging with it. It really covers everything.
Yeah, Azia, I want to bring out the design thinker in you, and you've been associated with D School and teaching this thing. And this concept of architecting a modern ecosystem is close to you. So can you illuminate a little bit here? How do you architect ecosystems? Like, what's the 101 on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've mentioned this to you before. I'm not a huge fan of the word alliances, right? I mean,
Mhm.
actually, we were kind of strategic alliances. I've taken out the word alliances when I joined, because to me that kind of reflects a little bit of a traditional thinking of an alliance between two companies. If you want to put it very negatively, it's people going out and having lunches and dinners, signing an agreement, doing a press release. That's kind of, when you think about an ecosystem, um, it is connected to even a natural organic ecosystem. It's a little bit like a spider's web, right? No single strand in the web is strong enough, but when you put it all together, it's an incredible offensive and defensive capability. Okay.
Mhm.
And you need to think about those threads, I mean, literally up on a board, right? This company together with this company for these products provides an offensive capability for this market segment, right?
Wow.
It doesn't always work out that cleanly, but if you're not thinking that way, you're not architecting a system ecosystem, you're managing individual partnerships and alliances, which is a
Mhm.
very different game. So I'm talking about, I don't play chess, not smart enough. I'm talking about a complex chess move of capabilities. And honestly, VMware has had to play that certainly with our hyperscaler friends, with our system. I mean, you have to architect that ecosystem. That's the game to be played, right?
Mhm.
And it's not a short-term thing. It's not a quarterly thing. It's a 2-3 year set of moves, which is
Mm.
why it's as close to kind of corporate strategy. So that's what I mean by architecting an ecosystem. The design thinking piece of it, for those of you that are familiar or not, I mean, it's an approach I used to teach at the Stanford Design School. It's a way to solve problems. It's a way to have what they call human-centered design, to look at problems differently, to brainstorm differently, to bring in a diverse set of people. So I'll pick on that point. So there's various components to it. I'm a huge believer in the diversity of thought, right?
Mhm.
And that diversity of thought is especially important for this role and this function. And that comes from gender diversity, it comes from ethnic diversity, educational diversity, functional diversity. The more different skill sets of people you have in the room looking at a problem, and especially architecting a partnership, the better you'll be. If you only have the experts in there, you are by definition going to be limited by the expertise in the room, right? And so you don't want just that product expert in modern apps, or just that product expert in a certain aspect of security and cloud. You want people who don't have that background, who don't have that expertise, to come in and simply ask the question, hey, why not? Why is that not possible, right?
Mhm.
They may not be right every step of the way, but that is very important. So that diversity of thought is very important. The other thing I'd offer of a design thinking principle that can be applied to ecosystems is, there's three circles involved in this. There's desirability, feasibility, and viability. So feasibility is, can you build something, right? The viability is, can you build something? Feasibility, sorry, is, can you afford it and the economics of it. And
Mhm.
then the third circle is desirability. Almost every decision in corporate America is made by looking at all three circles at the same time.
Mhm.
You'll have an engineer in the room says, yeah, that's a great idea, but we can never build it. It'll take long, and so on and so forth. Or you'll have a finance person or a business person or some other leader. Yeah, but we could do this, but it's going to take 6 months and 3 headcount and it's too expensive, right? And so that leads very quickly to suboptimal, unexciting decisions.
Mhm.
Now, what I would suggest, and what design thinking approach would suggest, is first look at the desirability. And
Mhm.
also from a human, what is the ideal solution here? What is
Mhm.
the thing that will put a smile on your partner's face, on your CEO's face, on the customer's face? What will delight them? first define that. Do you have a good sense of what that is? Once you
Mhm.
have that, then you can start chipping away from it and saying, hey, okay, we would love to do this, but we can't do this because the IT systems don't talk to this and this, and there's a data issue. Or it's
Mhm.
going to cost us a gazillion, bazillion dollars. But if you start from that desirability and work backwards,
Mhm.
you will almost always get to a better outcome than if you try and optimize all things together.
Wow.
So that's just kind of a way to think about any problem, if you will. I've enjoyed doing it, and I think especially in this function, it's critical.
Yeah, what a great thought there. It's if I get the gist of it, it's not just one move. It's like a complex set of moves that you're architecting. If you take the chess analogy, for to it, and you're architecting an ecosystem, but actually you're architecting that ecosystem for a customer delight, that user centered piece first, and then you're putting the pieces together, including your solutions, partner solutions put together, and hence you've architected a pretty amazing ecosystem at VMware. Talk a little bit of how you applied that at VMware in terms of some of the partnering changes or processes or emphasis areas that you've created there.
Yeah, I mean, as some folks may know, I joined VMware about 2 years ago. I was a senior partner at BCG, and VMware was actually a client there. So at some point, they said, "Hey, come do this," and I was excited about it because of what Raghu, our CEO, Sumit, our president, and some of the board members had very clearly articulated that VMware has a tremendous, rich history. Obviously, virtualization had built this up, but it was very clear that our future success
Mhm.
depended to a large degree on a thriving, active, dynamic ecosystem. Right? Okay, that's at the highest level. Um, then you need to break it up into the kinds of partnerships you're talking about. And it's an interesting dynamic. So we have a very rich, well-established channel. I mean, most of our
Mhm.
business goes through channel. You guys have helped us with that. The pieces of the puzzle that I kind of dived into was, on one hand, the hyperscalers. We'll talk about that. Awesome partnership with Google and Braun. The second piece was our system integrators, and I'll mention that in a second. Another piece is our tech partnerships. So the SAPs, NVIDIAs, Intels of the world. The fourth is kind of our vertical and industry solutions, right?
Mhm.
So on our hyperscaler piece of it, we have a strong view that our customers live in a hybrid cloud environment. And
Mhm.
a hybrid is a combination of private and public cloud. And then on the public cloud side, they may decide to be multi-cloud, right? They may have multiple public clouds. They may choose one. So for us, in order to provide our customers with a seamless experience between private cloud and public cloud, we have to have a very dynamic relationship with our hyperscale partners. And look, to some degree, sometimes it's not competitive, but we may have different perspectives. Most of the time, it's very symbiotic. And so we've, whether it's on the marketplace front, we're very active on marketplaces. You talked about this, Braun talked about this. But across the board, we are far stronger in our hyperscaler engagement across the board. And that certainly, I can tell you, is a chess game, right? Because they're all kind of connected. As
Mhm.
AWS, a great partner of ours, Microsoft, GCP, IBM, Ali Cloud, Oracle, great engagements with all of them. We, in fact, just last week had a fantastic event at VMware. It was our kind of hyperscaler day, where
Yeah.
we brought these six partners together. It was fantastic, right? I mean, and we had separate streams for them and some common sessions and so on. The
Yeah, I
GSI
remember
piece,
watching. I remember watching, and Niti posted from your team a number of good
yeah,
updates. I
yeah.
watched.
Niti manages Microsoft, does an
Yeah.
amazing job there. The other pieces are system integrators, and I must say that we had a good relationship with system integrators, but honestly, in our normal business with virtualization and so on, the work for SIs was there, but not that much, and we were probably punching below our weight.
Mhm.
As we look forward, and in the last 2 years, we've dramatically increased and enhanced our relationship with SIs.
Yep.
Many of them have created dedicated VMware business units. Deloitte's done that, Wipro's done that, HCL's done that. And it's absolutely clear, Amit, in a world where consumption and ARR and adoption is key, these colleagues, these companies have far more impact
Mhm.
on that topic. I mean, we may sell $5 million piece of software. One of our SI partners may have a $500 million deal and be in there for 3 years, right?
Mhm.
We sometimes overestimate our quote unquote kind of control of the customer or management of the customer. So we've had to kind of rethink and relearn
Yeah.
across VMware, honestly, that we need to partner with our GSA partners. And I think going forward, it's very much going to be about, how do we connect our professional services organization to our GSIs to really drive consumption and adoption. The final thing I'll mention is on the vertical side, and the domain expertise.
Mhm.
Huge proponent of that. I think most of our hyperscaler partners are GSIs, go to market on a vertical basis. Now you could say, well, VMware, you're pretty low down in the stack, you're in the data center and so on. Why do you care? We do care because increasingly, well, we're in modern apps, we have this product Tanzu.
Mhm.
We care about what the workload is, right? And the workload comes from the apps. And so by definition, we now care about the apps as well. We have a very strong telco business. We have dedicated business units. We are very strong on the public sector side. And then have really developed a capability on things like financial services, retail, and healthcare, right?
Mhm.
And I think in
Yeah.
particular, working with our GSIs, our hyperscaler partners, that vertical expertise and that vertical go-to-market becomes critical.
Absolutely. So as you architected this ecosystem towards these solutions, I think underlying some business workflows or processes need to change. And we worked on one of them together, which is the co-innovate process. But I'm sure there is more. So can you describe what underlying end-to-end processes you had to come down to and kind of rethink as VMware again?
Yeah, I mean, by the way, and not a plug, it's just the reality. Deeply appreciate the partnership between VMware and what you guys are doing. You've been working with our colleagues on the channel side and with Tracy Ann Palmer and so on for a long period of time.
Yeah.
More recently, you've been working with our team. We kind of on the managed services piece of it, which, by the way, we think is absolutely critical. I think there's multiple processes on the product side of things. If you look at the value chain, right? I mean, you build something, you kind of connect your product to partner products. Then you get kind of the marketing of this. Then you get to the sales piece and so on. I'd say the go-to-market piece of the puzzle, so the later piece of this, is where most of our attention has been. I think VMware has done a tremendous job on the front end, back end, depending on what you think about, on the product side and the solution integration and so on, right? Where we've been around for a while and we're very good at that. On the channel piece of it, we're also very good, right? I mean, there's always room for improvement. There's incentives, there's new technologies, approaches, and so on. What I've been focusing in on is again that GSI value chain and the co-sell piece of it, and how do we go really co-sell into the market. As you look at our hyperscalers, how do we work with their marketplaces? How do we look at what we call VMCU and incorporate this so that our sales force can also sell our hyperscaler products?
Yeah.
So it is really, Amit, on the co-sell side and that incentive piece, and a lot of the areas that you've been supporting us as well. I think a lot of the action is on that piece of it. And look, the internal IT technology, data integration, security piece of it is always slower than you'd want it to be, and always more complicated than you'd want it to be.
Yeah.
But that's life.
Makes sense. Yeah. Appreciate the partnership as well, and the entire flywheel that you're putting in place, from co-building with Solution Hub to co-selling it to managing incentives and doing it in an award-winning partner connected. This is awesome. This must be hard as well. Like, give an insider's perspective a little bit. How did you drive this change? Like, for example, MSPs is not easy. It's a change in the industry, right? So what are you doing to drive this change?
A lot of meditation and prayer. No, look, I think what is, and again, credit to Braun for articulating this. For somebody in this kind of role, working with partners is only one piece of the puzzle. And if you're honest with yourself, it's probably the easier piece of the puzzle, right? The part that you also have to have influence on and be able to architect is your internal ecosystem, right? Between marketing, sales, product, legal, and how do you, if your house is not set up to productively engage with partners, then meeting that was supposed to happen in a week happens in 3 weeks. A commitment that was made in an email changes, and I mean, there's just the noise in the system
Mhm.
that makes partnering hard comes more from internal disparate points of view than it does with anything else, right? It's
Mhm.
not that interface point. So I think it starts from, I'm super proud of the team that we've built, the leadership team in the world. So you have to really start with absolutely rock star people, right? I mean, our team and our HR organization sometimes complains about this. Our average seniority of people in our team is probably one of the highest in VMware, right? I mean,
Mhm.
and then people look at you should have a senior director and they should have so many direct reports and so on. We have a lot of senior directors and directors on our team, because if you're going to manage these large partners, you have to be bloody good at what you do, and you have to be experienced. If you start kind of having a different skill set, you're going to get what you get, right?
Mhm.
So I think one, it starts with the team, the quality of the team. For them to think of themselves as general managers of that relationship is super, super critical.
Right.
Then I encourage them to have a point of view, right? The role of a awesome BD person or a partner manager is not just to be an air traffic controller, connect people and so on. That's one piece of it. But I encourage our team and me to have a point of view. What should we do with Microsoft or Google or Wipro or Accenture and so on, or SAP? And then try and coalesce internally to that point of view and have a clear action plan, right?
Mhm.
And so you have to have a CEO, you have to have leadership, and kudos to our leadership, both on the engineering side, sales side. They recognize the importance of that ecosystem, and they've been super supportive. The journey is never done to some degree, but as you kind of look at our partners, you look at the customers, you look at what VMware has done,
Yeah.
I'm very proud of the progress we've made.
Absolutely. And I've been speaking with your GSI partners, for example, Jason at Wipro, right? Immense partnership. And it's as they set up the business practices around it, the culture that you've set in place, the culture that he set in place, there's a kind of the business unit culture that kind of coalesces together to drive, success for both companies. So kudos on that, and fascinating to watch this evolve.
You know what? One thing I mean, if I could,
Sure.
just on Jason, and who's tremendous in leading his organization. One of the things that surprised me, and this is on measuring success,
Mhm.
when I looked at briefing documents that I used to get, when meeting senior folks and so on, it
Right.
always talked about what's in it for VMware, right?
Mhm.
VMware has gotten this, VMware has 6% of this, and we need 7% of this, and so on.
Right.
I think that's ridiculous, right? We spend way too much time looking at who gets what slice of the pie, and nowhere near enough time on the size of the pie itself, right? I mean, it's like, you know 83% of zero is still zero.
Right.
Right? And so I think that's a very important perspective. Is it's not going from 5 million to 7 million. Look how much growth we've made.
Mhm.
What does it take to have $100 million business? Answer that.
Mhm.
What needs to be true to go from a $5 million business to $100 million business, right?
Right.
What needs to be true? And so we've encouraged our teams to kind of think of it that way. That doesn't mean everything that you say needs to be true will end up that way. But again, it's with that much more ambitious end in mind. The other thing which has been a big change for VMware is we need to really understand what matters to our partners. We
Mhm.
need to understand how they measure success. There is nothing more frustrating to just talk about you. This is what's important to us. It's this revenue, it's this channel piece, it's this, that, and the other. And I've seen such disconnects over my years. And
Mhm.
the partners don't sometimes talk about it, right? I mean, it's like you need to be honest, transparent. If you care, say, look, you're looking at these three metrics, we're looking at these three metrics, only one of them match up. Okay,
Mhm.
so why is that? If that's the case, you're not going to get anywhere a year from now and 2 years from now. And if it is different, talk about it, be explicit about it, either change or acknowledge that there is a fundamental difference in how you measure success, and build that into the partnership.
Well, what a terrific point. I was about to ask you, how do you measure success? But you kind of pre-answered that by, if I'm not mistaken, it's the whole pie, like the size of the pie that you're going after. Any other favorite metrics or way you measure
Yeah,
your
it's look.
industrial?
There's. I mean, you and the team, and there's so many different ways to measure it. I would add a mega point, and this is in the beginning. Certainly, my team and some senior folks at VMware were not super happy with me. Was you have to prioritize. You have to
Mm.
prioritize. People don't like it. People don't like being in whatever other tier of partner versus the top tier of partner and so on. But the reality is we have so many resources. More importantly, we have just an X amount of bandwidth on the engineering side, on the sales side, to deal with partnerships.
Mhm.
And I'm a big believer in focusing on impact. Okay.
Mhm.
Not activity. It
Mhm.
doesn't matter how many meetings you have in a week. Like, how's the partnership going with X? Oh, it's fantastic. We had 18 meetings this week. Okay, that's great. But that's activity, right?
Mhm.
The only way and the only thing that matters is impact. And the only way you can really have impact is by focus, right?
Mhm.
And focus both in terms of the number of partners, and focus in terms of the set of activities for that partner. I am supremely unimpressed by a long list of threads and conversations and meetings and et cetera, et cetera. Most people, most partnerships cannot focus on more than 2 to 3 things. You really can't. The
Mhm.
things that really drive the business, the things that really people care about.
Yep.
And I think sometimes folks don't pay enough attention to that,
Mhm.
and they think the volume of activity is a reflection of a great partnership, or the number of meetings is a reflection of the great partnership.
Mhm.
It's much harder to sit back for 5 hours to really think deeply what is important. What are the 2 or 3 metrics that will excite both sides or three sides? And do we have the resources, the capability to
Yep.
hit this out? And feels logical, Amit, but
Mhm.
in my experience, it's a skill that's severely underrepresented.
Yeah. So it's not about the size of the ecosystem or number of partners you can brag about. It's like the quality and the depth of the partnership and what actual impact that you've driven. So that's a really good advice. I've intuitively seen that a lot of these partnerships have that 80-20 principle. The top 20% really drive the value at the end of the day. So that kind of adds up very,
See,
very
so
quick.
this damn 80-20 rule, which just keeps coming back over and over, for entire life. So even though everybody, Amit, understands that's true,
Yeah.
if you look at the time, the resources your partner team is spending on the other 80%,
Yeah.
you'd be surprised.
Right.
And then they go ask for more headcount and more resources and so on, right? I mean, this is inside baseball, but in the 2 years I've been here, I have not asked for, except for one additional headcount. The size of our team has been absolutely the same. Not because I couldn't get more resources, because we didn't need it. It was a matter of focusing. It was a matter of making sure the right people are working on the right things and
Hmm.
doing less.
Right.
And I think that's been an important piece.
Fantastic, Zia. I asked this question of Bron, and I want to ask that question of you as well. People are coming into the partnerships world, as you yourself said. It's night and day in terms of partnership as a profession. People are excited about it. They're joining it. So, what advice do you have for partner professionals who are early in their career, who are driving this ecosystem led motions in companies? Like, what would you say to them?
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, I think it's a incredible um, time. It's an incredible role to be associated with, and I think that has really changed, right? Um, the pay for, the demand for ecosystem partnership alliance type roles is through the roof. So you would be choosing an amazing thing. Secondly, you have to be somebody that is able to connect the dots, right? You could have more of an engineering background, you could have more of a business background, but you have to be able to connect the dots in a very effective way, both internally within your company, with your partner, but also what's happening on the industry. So it's as much of a strategic role as it is kind of a partner management role. Um, I think you have to be the word business development, which is one of those words again, which can mean a lot. It can mean nothing. Um, but I think business development is an art. It's a skill set. It's how do you convert the hopes and dreams and aspirations into something that's concrete, that has economics, has value added, and be able to see that through. Um, be far more ambitious
Mm,
than you think, right? And this is my kind of question on: we have a $10 million business. How do you make it $100 million business? And this is not a matter of, hey, let's have stretch goals. That's a huge
mm,
stretch goal. I'm just saying intellectually, how do you, what needs to be true again, right? And so be somebody that is that CEO, that GM of that relationship,
mhm,
and be far more aspirational, and then
mhm,
figure out what pieces of the puzzle that you need to do. And finally, the world is made up of human beings. Even though we had COVID, we have Zoom. Get up and go meet people. This is a relationship business. You will have hundreds of stories, and you're negotiating a contract, and you kind of pick up the phone, and something's stuck, and so on and so forth. Um, Partnerships are not between Delaware incorporated companies.
yeah.
Partnerships are between the humans that are in those roles, that trust each other, and have the influence and capability in their own organizations to move them. So really focus in on the human and people piece of it, with the competence and the knowledge to make the magic happen.
What a phenomenal advice. Amen to that. And Zia, we worked with VMware and your team extensively. We feel the joy as well. How we worked on co-innovation with the solution hub and the end-to-end piece. How we worked with the incentives piece. How we worked in all these projects. Uh, there's some, if any advice that you would have for ecosystem professionals as they are embarking on similar projects, delivering this. How would they, fund such projects? How would they make a case for it? If you have any advice on that, would
Yeah,
really
I
appreciate
think maybe two pieces of advice. First, again, thank you, Amit. I mean, you guys have been a phenomenal accelerator for us on our ecosystem journey. Um, I'd say the first one is what I mentioned earlier: focus and impact, right?
it. Mm,
Um, have a very high bar, ask the tough questions. What is the focused activity? What is the end result? And is this going to have the impact you want, right? If that is true, then you'll be far more enabled to advocate for it. The question becomes budgets and so on and so forth, where those budgets come from internally.
mm,
um, I'm never going to have a problem getting resources either from my team or elsewhere if I can articulate
mm,
with some sincerity that this is the focus, this is the impact, and this is the time frame that needs to be done.
mhm,
Um, don't make perfection the enemy of the good. Well understood perspective. Uh, do it on stages again, and
wow.
and again, each stage should have focus and impact as the metric, if you will. I think the amazing thing that you guys are doing is there are learnings. This is not uh, overused phrase. This is not rocket science to some degree, right?
Mhm.
I mean, there is a way, there's a best practice on co-sell. There are things
Yeah.
that should be in place. You need to be able to share data and information between partners. One of the
Mhm.
things I loved about what you're doing is you are able at the field level to identify which partner sees which opportunity and so on and so forth, right? So these are best practices that you have enabled across many companies. Too many companies say, hey, no, we do it differently. I mean, this
Yeah.
is true. You can install an SAP system. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
we're just unique. That's
Yeah.
just not true, right? And so I think bringing in that perspective, showing us, what other people are doing, and then the network effect is phenomenal, right? Whether it's with Braun or Jason or AWS and Wipro, if they're on your platform, it makes it much easier for us to be on there. So
Mhm.
that's happening, I know, and I think as that expands, it will happen. It will happen more and more.
Fantastic, Zia. What a delight talking with you. There are a lot of questions for you here, so stick around for a couple of more minutes if you
Only
if you
only
felt
pick the easy ones.
Chip, I want to bring you back in. What's the community asking?
Oh, a bunch of great questions and comments. Actually, I'm going to start with a comment from Karen Fazio who's actually made the comment on LinkedIn. Great to hear that VMware supports their teams to think boldly. That allows partners to be very creative in how they bring unique opportunities to customers. So I thought that was
Yeah, Karen, absolutely, and I think for the ecosystem team in particular, this has been an important kind of linchpin. But it's not just about boldly, as I said, defining impact, right? And I mean, it's unbelievably hard to pinpoint what is the impact you're going on, right? And then it has to be measurable impact, so that becomes even more exciting. But yeah, it's super key to have that perspective. Otherwise, you're just like, hey, we grew by 18%. Okay, fantastic. Or we grew by 6%. That's not going to move the needle. We need to move the needle.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, this is a long one from our friend Roland. I think the essence of it is what's changed, and you talked a little bit about this earlier. But what's changed since running GEPG at SAP in the 2000s?
So, Roland, great to hear from you. GEPG, by the way, for those who haven't heard this phrase for a while, is Global Ecosystem and Partner Group. This was a very new thing of using the word ecosystem back then. So I did a little bit of recycling, so that's fine. I mean, the AI piece of it now is obviously going to be super interesting. I've had a bunch of discussions of late with consulting firms and others. Would encourage Amit, you and Chip and
Yeah.
others who are on here to really think about. I mean, there's obviously the sales co-pilot. Could be an ecosystem co-pilot.
Mhm.
Finding, I mean, this is again a sales co-pilot concept, but in an ecosystem perspective, is if you have solution A from company A, solution B from company B, you've got services from a third company, and they're focused in on retail customers. So if that's the sweet spot of those products and services
Mhm.
coming together, which companies at which stage of their evolution, which departments, etc., can you lean into, and how to, so there's all of those kinds of things, if you will,
Mhm.
that become very important. So AI will change a lot of things, and the ability to enhance time to impact.
Yeah.
By the way, way too many people focus on cost, right? I mean, the
Mhm.
cost is important, but that's not going to drive your business. That's not going to drive growth.
Yeah.
And so time to impact and revenue generation and new opportunities is what I believe is where the focus should always be. So Roland, I mean, in the AI piece of it is very important. I mean, the market, for those of you who remember, I helped create the first very early marketplace, or it was more of a
Yeah.
directory. It was
Yeah.
called the Ecosystem Hub back at SAP.
ESH. Yeah.
And it's amazing to see the role of marketplaces, and we are very active on a couple. We're going to add another couple hopefully here soon. I think that significantly changes the game. And Amit, if I understand, VMware procured some of our work with you through the Google Marketplace, right? And so it just shows you. So I think marketplaces reducing the cost of that transaction, increasing the time to impact. Some of those changes are just fascinating.
Awesome, fantastic. Maybe one last question, Nicole. Great questions, Nicole. You've been asking questions throughout. So Zia said he doesn't like the word alliances for a partner type. How do you define partners that have historically been defined as alliances?
Nicole, it's not a partner that was called an alliance can be called a partner today, right? It's for me, it's not so much the word. I'm kind of using the word to express a different kind of relationship between two companies. So I'm just probably unfairly using that as well, but there's a historical perspective. An alliance to me is a weaker word that describes a partnership between two companies. You may do a press release, it isn't as strong. It isn't the focus of the company, but it's an alliance. It's great to have. You can put it on a website and so on. So admittedly, I'm painting that in a potentially unfair picture, if you will. For me, a partnership is stronger. It's multidimensional. And especially if you put it in the context of an architected ecosystem, then that's kind of the next level of thing, right? If you will. So yeah, I mean, that there are companies that have had alliances for a long period of time. For me, partly, it's kind of reframing the work that needs to be done, reframing the complexity and the opportunity, and making it part and parcel of the core strategy of a company, right? The ecosystem, the channel for VMware is absolutely at the front and center. And we're coming up with our Explore event in a couple of weeks in Vegas. You will see so much of the announcements. There'll be some product announcements, there'll be some customer announcements, but still the vast majority of that momentum is around ecosystem. And you'll see stuff on AI with us as well. So hopefully that answered the question. It's more about the framing of that versus that, and how to look at it.
Yeah. Zia, this has been such a fascinating session. Thank you for giving us your insights, your time, and your energy. And you clearly focused on the right thing here today.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much, both of you.